Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to Free Beat, where I post new music-related content every single day. So if that sounds good to you, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. Let's get started. Today, I've got the Teenage Engineering OPZ, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about hi-hats and how just making subtle changes to what your hi-hat is playing can make big changes to the feel of your drum tracks. Now, really quick, if you want to follow along on a pocket operator, that is entirely possible. You see, they both have a 16-step sequencer. The pocket operators is laid out in rows and columns, so 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a, where the OPZ is laid out in one horizontal row. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. If you are on a pocket operator and you get lost, you can kind of use this for a reference point. The green dial right here, the first button right under that is count 3. It's the downbeat of count 3. So you have 8 on this side, 8 on this side. Simple as that. With that out of the way, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to want to do is get a kick drum and a snare drum in there. Now once we have these set in place, they are not going to change for the entirety of the video. So there we go, it's a good kick drum. We're going to put it right on beat 1, the downbeat, and then right on the downbeat of beat 3. Nice and simple. Let's move to a snare drum track. Snare drum is going to go right on the downbeat of 2 and the downbeat of 4. We've used this pattern countless times. Let's get that metronome out of the way now. So let's jump over to a hi-hat sound. If you're on the OPZ and have the stock drum sounds on there, bank number 2, and then if you press on the F sharp right here, button number 1, it has a really nice acoustic hi-hat sound, as well as a couple really nice open hi-hat sounds. So I like to use bank 2. So to start, we are going to put our hi-hat on beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. Let's have a listen. Now, this is where I'm going to bring up my first mention of the untrained ear. Basically, with that, I just mean a common listener who doesn't have that much knowledge of music. So to the average listener, they're going to think that this is kind of slow. Especially if they have something else to compare it to. Now, the tempo itself isn't that slow. We're at 120 beats per minute. But the hi-hat is just doing quarter notes alongside the kick and the snare. So there's nothing really jumping out there to make it feel faster. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some eighth notes in there. So we're going to put a hi-hat on each of the and. So the and of 1, the and of 2, the and of 3, and the and of 4. Now let's listen. Now see what I mean? To the untrained ear, that's going to sound a lot faster. And the reason it sounds faster is because there's more going on. The hi-hat is playing twice as fast as it was before. However, the overall tempo is still 120 beats per minute. Now if we remove those, tempo's the same, but it definitely feels a little slower. Now what if we want to dial this in even more? Well, we can do one of my favorite things and write a bit of a melody with the hi-hat. So it's going to be a rhythmic melody. Of course, we're not going to pitch it or anything like that. We're just going to go something really basic. How about dot 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 dot. So dot dot rest dot 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 rest dot 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 rest dot 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 rest. So basically, we're going to go in and we are going to take the hi-hat off of beat 2 and beat 4. What that's going to do is allow the snare drum to fully shine on beats 2 and 4, as well as giving the hi-hat a bit of a melody, like I said. So let's go ahead and listen. Now at first glance, it might not seem any different at all. However, if you just focus on the hi-hat, you'll notice that we did take out 2 and 4. So instead of you're going to hear. Let's listen. If we go in and we take out the snare drum, you can indeed hear it. Now, even to the untrained listener, this plays a subconscious trick on them. And not necessarily a trick, but it is noticeable. And if you play this for someone, they might not know it, but in the back of their head, they will feel that something changes. If you give them all the hi-hats and then remove two of them, the brain is going to detect that something is different. So that's a trick you can use if you want to change things up, but you don't really want to sacrifice any of your other tracks that you have playing, or any of your other parts, I should say. You can just make subtle changes to the hi-hat like that, and the average human brain will register a change, even if they might not know what that is exactly. So combining just that, along with, taking out the eighth notes and just playing quarter notes, we already have quite a bit of variety in our hi-hat, and even the most simplest of changes like that can really spice up your tracks and, make them stand out. Let's go ahead, though, and talk about 16th notes. So let's fill in every single note of our step sequencer. If you're on a pocket operator, everything's going to be red. Let's listen. Now, this is a pretty common pattern, both in sequenced music as well as acoustic music. But however, this instance right here doesn't sound as legit, I guess, as it could be. And that's because of one tiny little detail that a lot of folks don't think about. So in a pattern like this, a lot of times you want to be emulating what an acoustic drummer would play. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to bring in a couple props. Let's pretend that my lens cap is the hi-hat. Let's pretend this spare camera battery is the snare drum, okay? I'm going to play the pattern, and then I'm going to drum with my fingers, and watch what happens. There's not 16 hi-hats playing. I have to move one hand, finger in this case, but hand, off of the hi-hat to actually hit the snare drum. Not many drummers are going to sit there and play it all cross-handed, like that. So in order to simulate that on the OPZ or any sequenced music, we need to remove the hi-hat from 2 and 4 to simulate the hand crossing over from the hi-hat to actually hit the snare drum. So we're going to remove the hi-hat from beat 2 and from beat 4. Let's listen to it now. Again, sounds almost identical, but there is a little bit of a difference in there. And your brain is going to register on that. It's going to pick up on that, especially if there are more experienced users and musicians listening to your music. They will notice that detail, like, oh, that's the drummer's hand reaching over to the snare drum. It can't hit the hi-hat and the snare drum at the same time. It's going to go hit the snare drum. And it's a really appreciated detail. And I've started to notice things like that in a lot of music. I just really enjoy the small details like that. So let's go ahead and remove our 16th notes again. We're going to go back to the, come on, there we go. We're going to go back to this pattern here with just 8th notes. And I'm going to show you a couple more patterns that I like a lot that can kind of push the hi-hat into stardom. It makes the hi-hat the focus of the track. And these are really nice if you want the listener to maybe focus more on the hi-hat instead of the overall tempo, among other things. And it's pretty easy to do. So we've got these 2 hi-hats right here in the beginning on 1 and the and of 1. What we're going to do is go ahead and put a hi-hat on the E of 1 in between those. Then we're also going to go to beat 3 and do the same thing. Put it on the E of 3. Let's listen. This provides a nice drive to your hi-hat and just the drums in general. The drummer's just sitting there really laying into it. And of course, we can employ the trick that we used earlier where we took out the hi-hat on 2 and 4 to really kind of make the hi-hat feel more melodic like we did earlier, just with this added 16th note in there. Very, very cool. Another fun thing about this pattern is if we slow it down and add a little bit of swing, all of a sudden we have a very, very classic and familiar drum groove. Let's bring it back to 120 though, for the sake of this video. Bring the swing back down to normal. There we go. We're going to change this pattern up just a little bit, and we're going to use an open hi-hat sound for that. If you're following along on a pocket operator, depending on which one you're using, you might not have an open hi-hat sound, but that's okay. If you don't, just use a different sound. Experiment, explore. It's fun. That's what we're here for. So anyway, ooh, that's a nice open hi-hat right there. What we're going to do is take off the normal hi-hat from the end of 1 and replace it with this open hi-hat. That's going to simulate the drummer going like this. Now, if you'd really like, you can also do the same thing with that grouping of 16th notes that starts on beat 3. So we'll remove the hi-hat, the normal hi-hat from the end of 3, replace it with the open hi-hat. However, having it happen every time is a little too repetitive for me. Maybe it works in the context of whatever song you're working on. For me, it's a little too repetitive. So what we're going to do, though, is leave it on the grouping that starts on 3. We're going to leave the open hat on the end of 3. We're going to go and remove the open hat from the end of 1 and replace it with our original sound. Let's listen. Now, to me, this pattern takes on a whole new characteristic, and it feels a lot more like it's asking a question right here, and then in the second half of the pattern, it's answering the question with the hi-hat opening up, and then the hi-hat being sucked down shut with the slap of the snare drum right on beat 4. This is one of my favorite drum patterns. And all because we moved the open hat from the end of 1 to the end of 3. Now, if you're confused as to what I mean by asking and answering questions regarding drumming, go ahead and check out the video that I made on the subject, link in the description. Go ahead and give that a watch. It's a pretty interesting concept and one that is very near and dear to my heart. So between those 3, 4, 5, however many little hi-hat variations there were there, you can get a lot out of your drum tracks. And of course, these are just a starting point, just a jumping off point for you guys. Feel free to explore the deep end and create your own deep end. Go as far into this as you'd like. There's all kinds of different little tweaks we can make to the hi-hat. We haven't even touched on velocity and dynamics, which that's a whole, I almost said video, but that's a whole lifetime of study just by itself. Not to mention, you know, pitching our hi-hats. All kinds of cool stuff we can do. You know, let's so much stuff you can do. So if you guys come up with anything cool, or just if you're proud of your work, which you should always be proud of your work, link it down below in the description. I'll take a listen to it. I love hearing the stuff you guys make and getting inspired by all of you. Speaking of all of you, thank you so much for being here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, learned something. If you did, go ahead and leave a like on it. If not, you can leave a dislike. That's okay too. Doesn't hurt my feelings, just makes me try that much harder next time. Either way, be sure to hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. We're on the climb to 1,500 subscribers. We are almost, I think, to 1,420, which is just insane. I can't believe it. Every time the number goes up, I'm just like, oh, I get so happy. You guys are awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.